Morbid Angel was formed in Tampa, Florida, in 1983, in a fertile environment for the development of extreme sounds. Unlike other local bands that followed the lines of orthodox thrash or European speed metal, Morbid Angel displayed from the beginning a penchant for dissonance, dizzying speed, and ritualistic darkness. Founded by guitarist Trey Azagthoth, legal name, George Emanuel III, the band's technical and visionary approach was evident from their first demos. Azagthoth, deeply influenced by Baroque composers such as Bach and Vivaldi, sought to capture an aesthetic of ordered chaos, where each riff was a mathematical entity at the service of metaphysical horror. The band's early lineups were unstable. In 1985, drummer and vocalist Mike Browning, formerly of Nocturnus, participated in early recordings, including the unreleased material from Abominations of Desolation, an album recorded but shelved by Azagthoth himself, who considered it technically and artistically immature. This act of self-censorship foreshadowed the rigor with which Morbid Angel would approach their career. It wasn't about releasing material for the sake of fulfilling its mission, but rather about building a body of work consistent with their vision. By the late 1980s, the classic lineup was consolidated: David Vincent, vocals and bass, Pete Sandoval, drums, and Richard Brunel, rhythm guitar, accompanying Azagthoth. The inclusion of Vincent, formerly of Terrorizer, introduced a commanding voice and a more defined conceptual aesthetic. Sandoval, also ex-Terrorizer, brought a level of percussive precision and speed unprecedented to the scene, setting a new technical standard with his pioneering use of the blast beat as a rhythmic core, not an embellishment. This lineup was responsible for Altars of Madness, 1989, their official debut, recorded at Morrisound Recording under the production of D.B. Pearson, Earache Records. The choice of this studio was no coincidence. Morrisound, with engineers like Scott Burns, would become the epicenter of technical death metal, and Morbid Angel was a key player in that transformation. Morbid Angel's music underwent a radical metamorphosis between their early demos and Altars of Madness. In its genesis, the riffs were more linear, with relatively conventional structures for mid-80s thrash. However, as Azagthoth immersed themselves in personal studies of music theory, occultism, and deconstructive philosophy, the songs began to take on a labyrinthine quality. One of the most significant technical points in this evolution was the deliberate use of exotic scales and non-traditional modes in metal, such as Phrygian dominant, Locrian, and the ambiguous use of tonalities. Azagthoth tended to avoid conventional harmonic resolutions, choosing instead to leave the riffs hanging in controlled dissonances, which generated a constant emotional tension. Sandoval's arrival also boosted the band's rhythmic complexity. His percussive approach moved away from the typical D-beat or constant double bass drum. It incorporated irregular time signatures, the use of double triplets, and almost surgical playing at high speeds, sometimes exceeding 240 BPM. This forced the rest of the band to adapt technically and rethink song structures. Altars of Madness was thus the product of a collective technical maturation. On a compositional level, the songs ceased to be guided by pop/rock structures disguised as brutality, becoming compositions closer to Baroque suites in form, albeit disguised in an extreme language. This type of evolution was not common in extreme metal at the time, where repetitive patterns or rawness as an absolute value predominated. The year 1989 was a turning point in the evolution of extreme metal. As thrash metal reached its saturation point with increasingly accessible albums, death metal began to emerge as the sonic and aesthetic antithesis. Florida consolidated its position as the epicenter of the movement, with bands like Death, Obituary, and Deicide developing their own distinct languages. However, Altars of Madness wasn't just part of that ecosystem, it helped define it. Unlike the more punkish approach of Death or the doomy heaviness of Obituary, Morbid Angel opted for a mystical, technical, aggressive, and cerebral sound. The dissonance and complexity of their compositions distanced them even from their contemporaries. In Europe, bands like Carcass and Pestilence were evolving towards similar terrain, but still without achieving the coherence and technical maturity that Altars offered. In terms of production, many underground albums lacked the clarity necessary to allow for a true appreciation of the complex arrangements. Altars of Madness, however, achieved a remarkable balance between rawness and sonic definition, setting a new standard. Its impact was such that, over the next decade, dozens of bands attempted to emulate both its sound and compositional structure. Furthermore, the album helped cement the notion that death metal could be high-level sonic art, not simply brutal noise. This idea proved key to its acceptance in academic and technical circles, as well as among classically and jazz-trained musicians. The sonic approach to Altars of Madness wasn't accidental, but meticulously crafted. From the tuning to the choice of modes and the construction of sonic layers, everything on the album aims to create a chaotic yet structured sonic universe. Morbid Angel used standard E-tunings to maintain the percussive aggression of the strings without sacrificing definition, which proved essential for the density of the riffing to coexist clearly in the mix. The most frequently used modes include Phrygian and Locrian, although in many sections Azagthoth opts for a modal amalgamation where the scale is deliberately ambiguous. Dissonances, tritones, augmented seconds, diminished fourths, are used as melodic axes rather than accidentals, reinforcing an atmosphere of perpetual tension. In terms of metrics, Altars is characterized by constant instability, abrupt tempo changes, riffs that blur traditional time signatures, and drums that oscillate between a mechanical blast beat and a syncopated groove. The interaction of the instruments does not obey a linear logic, but rather a fractal one. The riffs replicate, decompose, and re-emerge transformed. The guitar texture is one of the album's great innovations. Using techniques such as articulated palm muting, tremolo picking, and layered alternation, a sonic density is built that depends not only on volume, but also on rhythmic and harmonic complexity. The mix, although crude, allows these textures to be perceived without overpowering the overall sound. In terms of production, a balance between aggression and articulation was prioritized. The kick drums have attack without losing body, the guitars are abrasive but legible, and the vocals sit just above the instrumental wall, without overpowering it. This technical approach was crucial for the album to transcend its era without becoming buried in the nebula of lo-fi production. Although Altars of Madness is often interpreted as a vision dictated by Trey Azagthoth, the truth is that each member contributed a unique technical and identity voice that gave the album cohesion. Trey Azagthoth is undoubtedly the conceptual and compositional driving force behind Morbid Angel. His guitar approach is based on the destruction of traditional rules. Instead of linear riffs, he constructs cyclical motifs, laden with tritones, unorthodox arpeggiator sequences, and a playing that favors chaotic expressiveness over cleanliness. His use of effects is restrained but precise. Subtle delays and reverbs expand the spatiality without muddying the attack. Richard Brunel, second guitarist, plays a more structuring role. His more restrained playing stabilizes the compositions and adds a solid rhythmic dimension. At key moments, his solos contrast with Azagthoth's ferocity, providing melodic lines that reinforce the harmonic architecture. Pete Sandoval revolutionized extreme drumming. His speed and precision aren't based on studio tricks, but on brutal physical discipline and technique. He uses double pedals in a non-ornamental way, as a compositional foundation, and his ability to fluidly alternate between complex time signatures makes him one of death metal's most influential percussionists. His mastery of subdivisions is comparable to that of jazz fusion drummers, albeit channeled into a surgical brutality. David Vincent, in his vocal and bass roles, provides the link between the conceptual and the technical. His vocal register serves not only as a lyrical vehicle but also as a textural instrument. His cavernous timbre intertwines with the guitars like a third harmonic layer. As bassist, he plays lines that frequently double the guitars, but also introduces melodic counterpoints at moments of breakdown, especially notable in transitional sections.